For this challenge in our Excel series, we're thinking about sum if calculations. And whilst there's not a direct replication of that in Tableau Prep, we can still make that happen with some logical steps. So our data set that we're working on this week is some flight data from Preppin, and it's got our destination, our departure, when the flight tickets were purchased, when the flight is actually going to take place, and the price of that flight. So if we wanted to combine our departure and our destination together into one field, so have it say London to Perth, for example, then we would need to write a calculation to do that. So that's our first step. So we're just having our departure, the plus symbol, the word to in inverted commas with spaces either side of the word to, and then another plus symbol, and then our destination. And that gives us London to Perth, for example, and then we can get rid of our departure and our destination fields. So that's our first step in this workflow. Then we want to calculate the difference between the date that the ticket is purchased and the actual date of the flight. So to do that, we need to write another calculation, this time using the date diff calculation, where the syntax is that we need to say what date part are we looking to work out the difference. So we want to know the number of days, so we write the word day between our date, which is when the flight is purchased, and the date of the flight. And that gives us a numeric value for how many days have passed. And then what we want to do is classify using an if calculation, if that is within a week, basically, of the flight departing. So we're creating another new field called sales of a flight. And we're saying that if it's less than 7 days, less than a week, then we're saying less than 7 days before departure that that ticket was purchased. Otherwise, we're saying 7 or more days before departure. So we're just doing those two categorizations. So you can see the majority of flights are being bought more than a week before departure, but there are quite a few that have been bought within that week. So then if we want to calculate the average and also the total sales for each of those flight paths, then we're going to use an aggregate step. And we're first of all going to focus on just doing the sum ifs. So we're going to group by our flight, our class, and our sales of a flight. And then we're just going to sum up those flight sales. And then we're going to build on knowledge from last week, and we're going to use that pivot step again, the rows to columns. And we're going to have our sales of a flight and our summed values here to give us for each of those flights and classes the total amount of sales that comes from the week before and more than a week before that flight takes off. Okay, and then we also want to know the average of those values. So instead of doing a sum at this point, we do the average. So we just select from the drop down here, rather than it being sum, which it defaults to, we just change that to be an average. And then we do exactly the same sort of thing here. And then we just join those two branches back together with our join clauses being class and flight, so that we keep just having 8 rows. So 8 rows coming in from both sides and 8 rows coming out. That is exactly what we want to be happening. And then all we need to do to make our output match is to round the average fields. So we're literally just naming it exactly the same as the function that we're rounding, and we're just making sure we wrap it in a round and a 0 decimal places there. And then we get the output that matches this week's challenge. So yeah, as you would expect, it's generally more expensive to buy your flight the week leading up to the flight, rather than if you buy it more in advance. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that challenge, and thanks very much for watching.